families in medical emergencies. And with her permission, I will write to her with the exact detail and the exact guidelines which are used by the government to determine who's eligible for those schemes.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are now 60,000 known deaths in Gaza. Israel is already accused by the ICJ and ICC of war crimes and including genocidal acts, and they're now committing a new war crime in denial of food and water to the people of Gaza. What will it take for the British government to cease all arms supplies to Israel, to end the use of the RAF bases in Akrotiri as a staging point for delivery to Israel? And when will we end the security cooperation with Israel to make it absolutely clear that we're not prepared to support a regime which is breaking international humanitarian law in so many respects?
Minister.
As the member is aware, as soon as the Foreign Secretary took office, he ordered a review into the compliance with international humanitarian law of various export items. And following the review, the government suspended export licences to Israel under a number of categories and assessed that where there was a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate serious violations of international humanitarian law. On the question of genocide, as he is aware, it's not a question for the Minister to determine at the dispatch box, but of course legal experts continue to look at definitions and descriptions of acts of war and will come forward with their determinations over time.
I'm planning to run this urgent question for only about another 10 minutes, so it would be very helpful if questions could be short, please. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over recent days, we have seen the power of addressing the most challenging diplomatic, military and humanitarian crisis when coordinated action is brought together. And yet in 17 months we have not seen a parallel when addressing the challenges over Gaza. So what action is her department taking to ensure that there is that coordinated effort, and will the Foreign Secretary call such a summit?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that suggestion, and certainly the UK will continue to work, as it has done, ceaselessly with Israel, the Palestinian Authority, the US and regional partners to build consensus for a post-conflict Gaza governance and security framework which supports conditions for a permanent and sustainable peace. And her request has been heard in the Chamber.
Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I ask the Minister what message does she think the government gives about its commitment to international aid in Gaza and indeed anywhere else in not only cutting it to 0.3%, its lowest level this century, but in removing the ability for this House to scrutinise that cut or any remaining spend by moving ministerial responsibility for aid and development from here to the other place?
Minister.
I thank her for her question, and there will be an opportunity later this week at the estimates debate for her to ask further questions. But as I'm sure she's aware, with her expertise in aid and development and in soft power, that it will take some time for the comprehensive spending review to come forward with a picture of how this will look in terms of resource implications. But I know also that she and her party do support in fundamentally the decision to look at the security of Europe as well and try and make that a part of the balance in our foreign policy work.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I understand that the Minister doesn't want to give a legal opinion, but isn't it clear that banning all supplies from Gaza is a breach of the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute? And failure to call that out emboldens Israel in its collective punishment of all Gazans. And will she confirm, as it was missing from her earlier statement, that when the government finally recognises the Palestinian state, it will include not only the West Bank and Gaza, but East Jerusalem as its capital?
I thank my honourable friend for all of his work as the chair of the all-party group and also for his ongoing campaigning in this area. To be clear, humanitarian aid should never be contingent on a ceasefire or used as a political tool. And of course, East Jerusalem should be the shared capital.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are horrified at reports that the UK government is not only complicit in Israeli atrocities, but has actively and directly participated in the war crimes and ethnic cleansing perpetrated by Israel. So will the Minister explain to this House what the UK's participation and role has been in the Israeli genocide and the ongoing atrocities that continue in Gaza and the West Bank?
I thank the honourable member for his question, and as I've mentioned before, it's not for the Minister to determine the definition of genocide, but it is for legal experts. But in terms of the role of the UK, the reason that I, as the Indo-Pacific Minister, am here before you today is because our Middle East Minister, the member for Lincoln, is currently engaging in conversations and pushing for a peaceful solution. And there could be no better thing than a face-to-face meeting with a Minister of His Majesty's government in the region, having those important discussions and pushing for peace.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With almost 20,000 Palestinian children killed, Gaza and its people are in a state of devastation. The use of starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. The denial of humanitarian aid is a war crime and leads to babies freezing to death, an example the Minister gave earlier. What specific action is the government taking with allies to pressure the Israeli government to comply with international law and let aid into Gaza?
I thank the honourable member and for all of her work she did before she entered this Parliament on aid and on supporting international solutions for war-affected areas. And specifically, our work does continue with partners, be that Israel, the Palestinian Authority, the US and regional partners, to build that consensus, because we all want to live in a world where aid is no longer necessary, where there's a vibrant economy, where people have jobs, schools and hospitals. And that's what the UK is doing, redoubling our efforts for post-conflict Gaza governance security framework that supports conditions for a permanent and sustainable peace.
Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must admit it's been very frustrating today to hear the practical inaction from this government in the face of flagrant breaches of international law, the siege of Gaza, and I sincerely hope the government doesn't continue down this path of inertia. With that in mind, what steps is the Minister taking to immediately recognise Palestine as a state, as part of the two-state solution based on the 67 borders? This is surely essential to reinvigorate the peace process and deter those extremists seeking perpetual conflict in Gaza, the West Bank and across the Middle East.
Yeah. He's quite right to describe what feels like a hopeless situation, but I would just remind him that, over the last few weeks we've seen some rays of sunlight, a few bits of hope, as hopefully less violence is being perpetrated and more people are coming back to their homes. However, he's right to push the government and to say what more can be done, and that does include those visits to the region to speak to those interlocutors I've mentioned and to keep pushing for peace.
Steve Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course, many of us in this House want to see progress towards a permanent two-state solution after the current ceasefire and hostage deal. And in December, the Prime Minister announced that the Foreign Secretary will be convening a meeting of partners to support civil society, both in Israel and Palestine. I wonder what update the Minister can provide the House on how the UK will plan to support the International Fund for Israeli-Palestine Peace.
Minister.
I thank the member for his question, and of course in the short term Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza will be phased. All parties have agreed to this, but in time we must see the occupation end as confidence is rebuilt in Gaza and Israel. The Palestinian Authority should play a key role in the future governance and security of Gaza, and for the deal to work, we need all parties to cooperate, including to make future security arrangements which protect both Israelis and Palestinians and allow the safe distribution of aid in the vision of the two-state solution.
Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite the appalling abuse of hostages who were released and the propaganda value which was made of them, the Israeli government in 42 days has allowed 25,200 truckloads of aid into Gaza, enough to sustain the entire population for 4 months. The concern is this, it's a fact. The concern is this, that Hamas are now using aid as their major source of income. seeking to control the